And welcome to another episode of the Trucking Risk and Insurance Podcast, where we get to talk to some of the greatest people in the greatest industry in the world. And that, of course, is transportation and trucking. This week is no exception. We have Magic Mike. Oh, sorry. They do call Mr. Mike Ace McCarron Magic Mike sometimes because of what he can do to the logistics and the trucking industry. However, we're going to be talking about some of Mike's opinions as to where trucking is headed. That's this week on the Trucking Risk and Insurance Podcast. Listen in. Here we go. Mike, how are you today?
Happy Monday. Mike's good. He's going on vacation tomorrow with some of my trucking brethren, so life's good.
Good deal. Well, you're looking good as you're getting ready for a vacation, so good deal.
Up a successful COVID battle a couple of weeks ago, so we got that out of the way, so we're ready to go out.
Perfect. That is perfect. And I can only imagine some of the conversations you might be having with your trucking buddies while you are away, but we won't get into that. What I would like to ask you about, we've had a couple of conversations, and there are some prognosticators out there. Or forecasters out there who say trucking is going into the ditch in the way of economics and rates and everything. What do you think is happening out there, Mike?
Well, it's a great question. So as I mentioned to you, I've been doing some work on this for a recent column with Today's Trucking. And, on the one side, you've got Bank of America, you've got the Freight Waves people, looking at predominantly spot market data and predicting, a real downturn. I guess there's been about 12 freight recessions since 1972. I think I've lived through all of them. And so on one hand, that group, based on spot market data, is saying that times are going to be very difficult. Then you got DATS on the other side saying, well, I don't know how difficult it's going to be. The numbers in March were poor because a lot of people pulled freight out of the spot market, moved to the contract market, and that's impacted the numbers. I do know that contract rates have never been higher. The carriers I know have never been making any more money than they are today. And after the stuff, and I'll just leave it at stuff because there's no 7-second delay on this, that truckers have gone through the past, couple years. A reset is not a surprise. And I think Canadian carriers in particular have to be careful, the numbers they're reading, who's saying it, and what these analysts have to say, because they don't have boots in the ground and they don't know your business, your sector, or your geography. So it's, I'm not an economist, but I think it's a lot of noise myself.
Geez, you're being so polite today. A lot of noise. You could have said.
My wife warned me it's not a hockey podcast, so.
Well, and you're right. It's not a hockey podcast, but I can hit the bleep button anytime. But anyway, what are you hearing from the Canadian carriers? From my perspective, most of my years in trucking, I heard a lot of crying from Canadian carriers as freight rates sucked. And quite honestly, I didn't understand why anybody would want to own a trucking company a few years back. What are you hearing is happening out there now?
Well, I think people are concerned about a lot of things. I think they're coming off a great run, but it was still a tough time to do business. You're trying to service your contract carriers. You've got inflation, everything's going up, and still a hard insurance market. Fuel's up 33% since March, so carriers can't get new equipment. So, I think everything's in a holding pattern. I think people like the numbers today, but I think between the war in Europe right now, the Chinese lockdowns, all indication are that people are spending more on services and hard goods as they come out of this post-pandemic. So I think there's a lot of nervousness, and one advice I always give people, I think June is a real bellwether month. I think June's a real bellwether month. You've got the school back to school, warehouses are getting filled, the holidays, Halloween, Christmas, produce starts, a lot of flatbed stuff moves for infrastructure work. So June will be a real indicator of what's going on for sure and how this might play out. But as I said, I think it's the outside factors that worry people more, and the uncontrolled outside factors more so than what I call the trucking factors, the things that people feel they can actually control. I think the one thing that, just to note, that Summit will protect the carriers from the carriers. If you look at the 12 freight recessions in the past, most of them are caused by carriers when business gets good going out and buying too much equipment and changing the economics of 101. So now the OEMs are protecting the carriers from themselves because they can't get equipment. Yeah. So I'm pretty confident that's going to really soften any massive turn, because the only way carriers can get new equipment is to buy a trucking company, frankly. So I think it's just all these variables in the unknown that got people pondering. But I do think a lot of people in the market are making a lot out of something using data that's probably not applicable to most people in the Canadian market.
Go ahead, John. Did you have a question?
Well, I was going to say there's been a big change in the industry here recently because of the rates the way they've gone. There's been a lot of independent owner-operators that have gone out, got their own operating authority. Looking at the numbers from FMCSA alone, the number of US DOT numbers that have been applied for in the last 12 months is just historically humongous. So that's going to be an interesting environment. We're going to have a whole lot more individual independence on the road now. And this can't help them either with this, trying to get equipment, paying through the nose. And then you talk about, with fuel prices gone up. Just this weekend alone, they jumped 15%. 30 cents a liter they jumped. My vehicle's diesel, so I'm monitoring the diesel price constantly. And Friday morning, it was around $2 a liter. And Saturday morning, I was going through regions that were $2.30 a liter. And I'm like, are you kidding me? So that's going to hurt the owner-operators as well as the companies. It's going to come back to the bottom line. The fuel surcharge has got to go up some more, so somebody's got to pay that. But at the same time, gasoline's gone up. So when does the public start screaming an outcry to go, what the hell's going on here? When's this going to calm down?
Well, I guess, so you've made a lot of good points. So on the trucking side, I saw those stats, and apparently there's over 100,000 new carriers, which is probably owner-operators and small guys. I'm not sure where they got the equipment, but I assume in the used market. And there's no doubt those are the ones who are going to pay the price. The small carriers, the independent carriers, the ones that, about 10 to 15% of carriers' capacity, the large carriers is in the spot market, but it's a real playpen for the small carriers and the owner-operators. Fuel surcharges all in normally, and I don't know how they're going to offset the cost. I really don't know that. It's a great question, but, I wouldn't want to be an owner-operator now.
No.
Who and you see all the time, they think the getting's good, I want to get a piece of this pie. But they're the ones that are really going to get hurt because they're the ones that play in the spot market. They live and die by it, and that's what's really getting hurt now. Is that contract rates are highest as ever been, and it's why you really have to be careful with when you start reading these people that are looking into the so-called trucking crystal ball, because they base it on data that is not relevant to all sectors of the industry.
No, and it's usually historical data, but there's so many underlying different situations with it. I just read an article this morning by Alain Bedard of TFI, and he's going, there's no recession. There's going to be no recession. This is a different time. The things that brought in a recession are not the same they are today. So just as you'd mentioned, it's not the same. It's different. So the analysts have got to pay attention and dig a little deeper here, because it's going to be quite unique and different. So does this mean it's a good time to be a driver? Driver wages should be on the way up. Driver demand is huge right now.
Well, I think driver wages are at historical highs. I frankly don't like the way drivers are paid. I think the per hour system is fine. And I get hate mail about this all the time. I don't like the per mile model. I think it makes for unsafe highways. I think drivers are chasing hours. I think it, what other job do you lose pay when the weather's bad? And I think that is a huge part of the problem. So, drivers are making historical amounts, but it's still not enough. You've got every single industry needs people. There's a huge human capital problem, and trucking's got a lot of negatives about it. The lifestyle. You miss every birthday party, you miss every soccer game, and it's something has to give, because that is my biggest fear long term. And I think the way we pay is a real problem. I really do. You can't pay people the same as someone who's staying at home and cutting grass all day. It's just not the same.
Well, I was going to say, I'll speak for Chris, because I like to speak for Chris, because my lips move like Chris's move. But nonetheless, we're both big advocates of hourly or salary pay, and I think one of the big dilemmas is your new drivers coming into this don't understand this per mile or piecework concept. They're coming from working at gas stations, McDonald's, the grocery store, where they were paid for all the time that they worked. You punch in, you punch out. Well, we have the technology with ELDs. Like, guys, trucking companies, get on the ball. This is the perfect time for a transition. And I know companies that are paying by the hour, and they're not having near the trouble of the turnover that we see with other carriers.
No, absolutely not. It's something has to give at some point in time. The definition of stupidity is doing the same thing all the time, expecting different results. Yep. And of course, you've got this notion of with the Driver Inc. side of things, where people want to be paid that way as well. And it's kind of damned if you don't. But the reality is that we do have a human capital problem unless something drastic gets done. And to your point, and I'm not going to name the fleets as irrelevant, but I know 4 fleets in Ontario, two significant ones that pay per hour, and it works. It works. It's fair. These are get people. And the one thing that people forget about is when guys get late and they've lost days, they start chasing miles. Yep. And you start chasing miles, you get tired. You don't have time to rest. The job continues to be unhealthy. Like, the stats are nuts, as you know, with obesity and smoking and are grossly overweight. And a lot of that is because they're just because they're chasing miles.
Sure.
And
stress.
It's a risk to public safety. You combine that with the fact that these new drivers need 103.5 hours of mandatory training, which is just about enough to get a license. And you wonder why unfortunately, when we have accidents or big ones, I know that we're safer drivers, but it's a dangerous job when you're out there chasing hours.
Yep. No, it's, in my opinion, now it's absolutely the way to go, to pay by the hour. Why is this industry any different? And I mentioned to you before we recorded this that I was doing a road tests on Saturday, and I drove by a Tim Hortons, and they're having a job fair on May the 7th. They're advertising now, which was still in April on Saturday, trying to get people. And we've been saying that there's a driver shortage for years, which there really hasn't been. I think there is now.
There's an everything shortage. Yeah. Well, the driver shortage was, but there's every single person I know. So 2 things that people think are unique to trucking that I don't think are. Every single industry I know has a human capital problem, and every single industry's got a Driver Inc. problem, meaning workers that want to work as independent contractors. They're not exclusive to trucking. Every single, to a lot of these immigrants, being self-employed is more important than things like vacation pay and workman's comp. And, the drivers end up paying the ones that go and Driver Inc., but it's very important for them. It's a way that they want to be self-employed. They want to have the largest fleet where they worship on Sundays, and they're not driven by lifestyle. And that's the reality of the future trucking, because what's going on today reminds me of, it was before my time, but this Canadian trucking industry is built with farmers, and the people that are coming over here from South Asian countries, they have a farm background, and they'll do the work, but it's that balance between how do you pay them. There's a lot of noise in the market, but to this point in time, I haven't seen a lot of enforcement.
I remember back in the day, you couldn't even drive truck on a Sunday till midnight.
Or you couldn't work.
Yep.
Yeah, we won't go that far back. Come on.
That was funny because I remember my dad having an afternoon nap every Sunday. I couldn't understand why, and it was like, oh well, I can't leave till like 10 o'clock at night to get across the border, so I got to wait. So I have a nap, and then I can drive. It's Monday morning now. I can drive. So
well, the reality is this generation of Canadian kids, they don't want the jobs. They don't want them. There's opportunity getting more women involved. There's opportunity with disabled people. There's with military, but the problem you have, I don't believe it's so much anti-trucking. In fact, if anything, our brand's never been stronger. It's never been stronger. We see this in our investment banking business. I see this in what I'm doing currently at Right Route. But we're competing with other sectors where the jobs are more conducive to a better lifestyle. These kids want lifestyle. They're wired. My kids are wired so different than me. I can't believe I raised them.
Oh, great. Yeah.
Yeah, but they value things we didn't value. They're not chasing the buck like we are. They want, like, the thought of this generation of kid. In the old days, that's what you did to take care of your family. This generation of Canadian kids, they don't want to miss their kids' baseball games. They don't want to miss their daughter's recitals.
Exactly.
And they're not going to, and they can make the same money working in the city and not driving a truck every day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I mean, there's a lot of jobs, a lot of factory jobs. Look at, and not even factory, if you were a carpenter or an electrician, any trade,
you're gonna, huge right now.
Yeah. Gold.
Yeah, and why wouldn't you pick a trade where you sleep in your own bed every night as opposed to being a truck driver and being on the road?
Yep, I agree. I saw the other day, guys, $56,000, including benefits and 3 weeks vacation, to basically bag groceries at a major retailer.
Yeah.
Jeez. Wow. Why not? I remember in 2003 when I closed my trucking company down, I sat down with my 2 kids, and they were just coming into their teens at that time. So they still had time to go. And I said, look, if you're interested in being part of this company, I'll keep it going. And they both looked at me like I had 3 heads, and they said, why? We watch you work 80 hours a week. We don't want to work 80 hours a week. And neither one of them work their butts off, and they make decent money. And it's kind of funny because, like, why do I want to do that? I won't get to spend any time with my family. Dad, you never spend time with us. You're always at the shop. You're in the office. You're on the truck. You're going down the road. What? I don't want that life. So they saw that, and that was 20 plus years ago.
Well, that's one reason the M&A business is booming. The kids don't want the business. They're not. If you look at a lot of these companies in this sort of first and second wave of Canadian trucking companies, the owners are truck drivers. They love it. They'd rather fix a truck than worry about running the books. And they've been successful. They made a ton of money in real estate. The real estate model portfolios are nuts. And the kids all went to Ivy League schools and they got MBAs, and they're probably a lot smarter than us, but they don't want the job, plain and simple. And I remember when I was a chairman up at Trucking HR Canada, talking to guidance counselors, and when all the cards are stacked against you, you have to do something differently. And I don't know what the answers are, but the bottom line is your professional truck drivers should be, you need to go to 4-year apprenticeship school to frame a house, but not to roll down the highway at 80,000 pounds. You need 103 hours to teach you how to drive safely. Like that, it doesn't.
Yeah.
It doesn't.
Mind-boggling.
No. Hey, I've got to ask you a question, because I've always wanted to know, and maybe our listeners and watchers need to know. What the heck is ACE? Mike Ace McCarron is how you are best known. So ACE, where did ACE come from?
Well, I got to tell you, gents, I wish I had a really good story for you. But it's about 55 years old, and I got in the back of a sandbox, and I was actually ace paving at 22 Renault Crescent in the sandbox all the time. So believe it or not, that just carried on. And I guess the reality is all my kids' friends call me Mr. Ace. A lot of people don't know the name. I actually don't like it because it's a pretty arrogant nickname. But rest assured, I didn't give it to myself. It has nothing to do with my prowess on the athletic field. How's that?
Well, speaking of prowess on the athletic field, do you want to explain your background there? You've got, Oh, sorry. Before we move on, you used an acronym that maybe our listeners didn't catch or don't know. You said M&A. M&A means?
Oh, that would be merger and acquisition. So the company I started out of, once I worked off my non-compete MSM, I started an investment bank called Left Lane Associates that does just the only one in Canada, supply chain M&A. So, we see it's really kept me engaged in the space. It's fun, but that's what's driving a lot of the exits of the Canadian truckers is that the kids don't want it, and we see that in that practice every day.
Yeah. And of course, recently you've started another company. You and your son stepped out.
I did. So Left Lane made an investment. So Left Lane, for full transparency, was getting a little bit too much for me. I retired because I was sick of working, to John's point, 70-hour weeks. I thought I could start a little investment bank, found a good, young, smart partner, and thought I can do this, pay the wife's visa bill, and work a couple days a week.
Yep.
And 5 years later, we're doing upwards of 20 deals a year. I was back working 80 hours a week, and to be quite frank, I couldn't keep up with these kids anymore. They just worked in with this computer, and I'll give you a fun example. And I think there's always these magic moments. During the pandemic, we renovated our office, and I was the one charged with getting the office furniture. So I had a hell of a time. And, instead of going online, I did the old-fashioned way and went to furniture stores. I reported to the staff. I said, guys, I can't find the type of desk I was looking for. There's nothing big enough to store all the paper. And one of the young staffers, got real brave and looked up and said, Mike, we don't need desks with paper. And I said, well, where are you going to store everything? Well, Mike, we store everything in the Google Drive. You're the only one that prints anything in this business. Well, then I started looking at, then they didn't want to have receptionists, and they had this Google Drive they didn't tell me about because I was afraid they'd screw it up. And I really realized, and all kidding aside, that you can't lead a group of millennials when it's do as I say and not as I do. And when we moved to the CRM that basically tells you when to call customers, I'm like, I can't do this anymore. And it was really more me saying that these kids are out working me and I can't keep up. So we had looked at the third party space significantly. We really believe that there's a real technology play there. So Left Lane invested in a company called Right Route Supply Chain Solutions. I was going to retire full on, but getting a chance to work with my son, and he was a professional hockey player. I just never spent a lot of time with him for 10 years. So just it's more a family play. I get to teach my son the trade, and it's been really fun.
Sweet.
That would be excellent as far as I'm concerned. I'd love to
great opportunity.
Have the opportunity to work with my son.
He loved it. Mm-hmm. He wasn't happy. So he started the investment bank. He was playing professional hockey, got pandemic out, came home and nothing new, started working for Left Lane, joined our team as an investment banker. And, we looked at this opportunity, but he wasn't that excited about it when he found out that, like everyone else, he had to take a major pay cut to start it up. But so far, so good.
Yeah. Well, I it's funny you talk about those young kids and whatnot, because I remember a phrase I refer to frequently that Steve Jobs spoke about. We hire people smarter than us so they can tell us what to do, not us tell them what to do.
True. I believe that. Yep. I believe that's the biggest mistake entrepreneurs make. If you hire people, when you're an employee in a big company, you're afraid to hire smart, but they might be smarter than you. Well, if they're smarter than you and you play that properly, you're going to move up the ladder. And we've this hiring thing's interesting. So you talk about hiring. We hire non-experience, and we teach them the business. Because we don't hire. I hire for heart and integrity. In fact, in both our companies now, we only hire known people because we tried this, putting it out in the paper and interviewing 400 people. You can teach anyone the transportation business. You can't teach heart and integrity.
No.
We've got 2 kids, my son and a friend of a friend we hired. And between the two of them, they're doing $600,000 a month in business after 4 months. They didn't know the business. Wow. It's not a hard business. And everyone's paying people all this big dough to come, and this is a very teachable business. And we realized a long time ago where our turnover. I learned this at MSM years ago. You have to hire for heart and integrity, and if you have that, the rest is easy. People, I think, hire too much for what people bring to the table. trucking is a very teachable business.
Well, and you're spot on with that for the simple fact that a lot of guys will hire, I'm looking for somebody with experience versus taking and finding the right person with the right attitude and the right personality. And let me teach you to be a better driver. I work with so many clients, and it's funny because the safety departments, and I know Chris sees the same thing, the safety department will have squat for experience in the industry, but they're the ones telling the drivers how to do their job. And it's like, hang on, if you engage with the driver and ask the driver, how can we do this better? The driver would be glad to help you. But drivers don't take kindly to being told what to do.
How can you be a safety manager and never drive a truck? Like, how do you, it's no different than these fancy dancy Wall Street financial analysis telling you about doom and gloom when they don't understand that, like the one guy, and names are important. One of them released a scathing report about the markets dropping recently and didn't realize that in spot rates the freight is all in.
Okay.
They just, they know enough to be dangerous. And that's why, as I say, I think that truckers have to be really careful of what they're believing out there, because nothing's going to get worse than the last 2 years. You knew it was going to reset. You knew it was coming. And so where's the surprise? Like, there's
long overdue.
And there's no way it could continue like that. Not a chance.
Yeah. Mike, you're talking to two safety guys or two ex-safety guys, and we're both consultants. Can you say again your opinion of, and I'll translate it a little bit, but who makes a good safety manager? What's one of the things that a safety manager, in order to run a successful safety department, what's one of the things they have to have?
Well, I would think, and my background is 100% sales. In fact, many people in this industry want me to get a driver's license just for shits and giggles, but I don't know how a good safety manager can not be an ex-driver. He needs to be driving better than that driver. He has to live the life, and that's part of what we're doing with our team. You got to live the life as a dispatcher before you run a business. So, I personally never understood why driving. I see this a lot of things. Once you're a driver, you're always a driver. What other company do you hire people so you're always a driver? Like, drivers are smart people. It's a tough job.
Exactly.
Why are drivers involved in pricing decisions? There's so much more they can do, but I just don't. I'm sure, and I have to be careful to all the great safety managers out there. That's not a shot at any of them, but I would think that to get the respect of the drivers, which you need, you have to speak their language and have lived in their shoes for a significant amount of time.
Yep, agreed.
Mike, as we're approaching our time limit here, can you explain the background that you have behind you, over your shoulder there?
It's all cockeyed. So the one side is, I was very active in hockey. I was very active. I owned a junior hockey team called the St. Michael's Buzzers for 15 years, the Ontario Junior Hockey League team. And that particular team, my son was a captain. We were all Ontario champions. We sent 22 players to the next level of hockey, and we also had 7 players on Team Canada. That's my son's Team Canada sweater.
Well, that's pretty cool. I mean, go ahead.
I literally just put that up there because I didn't want to look at my wife's credentials. So it was a real. That's not up there permanently. That was like, do you want to see my wife's credenza?
No, but
you better be careful because I could make it to the honeydew list, and now you got to redo the credenza for her.
No, John. Like, so to be clear, I've got a toolbox. It has 2 tools in it: a pen and a checkbook.
There you go.
I had the pleasure one day, many years ago now, of going to a dinner that you were hosting, and it was a fundraiser for your hockey team.
Tim Richardson, I'm sure.
Yep. He invited me to come along. That was probably the first time that I met you. So that was a few years back. Thanks
for your support. And that was one of the great things about St. Mike's. They have such great history, over 100 years of hockey, and you get the stars out. And it was really fun. It was a lot of fun. I got out of junior hockey a few years ago because it's just getting a little too wacky right now. The parents are getting wacky. It's no longer with the kids. It's about, anyways, it's good. It's hockey's wackier trucking, if you can believe that.
Yeah, I believe it.
Because everyone thinks their kids go to the NHL, and just doesn't happen.
Yes. Being a parent of two kids that were always very active in extracurricular activities, one of them being hockey as well. Yeah, the parents back in my generation were getting wacky. So I can't imagine what another 20 or 30 years have added to that.
Yeah, I'm 62, buddy. I'm not far behind you, pal. Trust me. That was fun.
That's when you get wacky grandparents.
My solution to get rid of the parents, I just coached all the teams.
There you go.
I talked to parents. I just went in the dressing room and I just coached. It was really easy. I dealt with kids. And, it's interesting because it's new business. We're hiring. We're going to kids that we've hired the last year, 5 kids. You talk about targeting people. So we put an ad for sales manager. We had 300 applications. I phoned a kid that used to work, play for all Ontario team, done. And we just hired another one last week. So I'm deeping into these kids who I know have integrity. They know how to win, and we got a relationship. And that's where we're getting employees for our businesses now. Kids I used to coach in hockey.
All right, Mike.
Perfect.
I got to say, Mike Ace McCarron, thanks so much for coming on the Trucking Risk and Insurance podcast. This was good. It was fun. Johnny, any last questions?
Love the insight. Hopefully we can do this again. We'll follow the future and see where it goes, but it is a different time.
I'm a big fan. Great to, glad I invited myself on. That was really nice of me. And so
glad to have you.
Now, that's not exactly true. I had mentioned to you at the NRRS, and you had said yes, and I hadn't followed up yet. That's
Bruce Outridge keeps bugging me, but I wrote a column about the 5 best movies and songs. And I said I'm not talking for an hour and a half about On the Road Again by Willie Nelson. I'm not doing that. You guys, a lot of fun.
All right, thanks, awesome. Mike.
All the best. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Thank you.
And that was Mr. Mike McCarron. Got to thank Mike so much for coming on the show and expressing his opinions. John and I are so appreciative. And we are very appreciative of you, the viewer and the listener. If you're getting value, please click a like and subscribe and leave us a comment. Who would you like to have on the show? What did you think about Mike's interview? All right, that's it for this week. The Trucking Risk and Insurance Podcast. We're done till next week.